Tonight, a Denver7 Investigates special report.
Well, it's 911. My mom and her boyfriend got into a fight, and she's screaming about her neck right now.
They let her down. They let her kids down.
Calls for help ignored.
They did not do their job to protect and serve.
In possession of a small handgun, essentially homicidal.
A terrifying scene in lower downtown Denver.
Warning signs missed.
And I truly believe that many, if not all of these deaths could have been prevented.
Reports of abuse overlooked.
It appears like we made a mistake.
A slap in the face?
Yeah, a large slap in the face.
I'm killing him. I don't have nothing to lose.
Tonight, Denver7 Investigates. Dying for change.
It looks like a cover-up, sir. Did this deputy embarrass your department?
He did.
I just lost both my parents, and that could have been prevented.
Here is Chief Investigative Reporter Tony Kovaleski.
Good evening. Tonight, a journey bringing to light stories some in law enforcement would probably rather you not see. Mistakes, attempted cover-ups, and missed warning signs during critical calls. Calls for help for domestic violence that sometimes ended in murder. Our journey begins with the murders of Kirsten Lockett, Krista Benton, and Kara Russell. All three women told police they'd been abused, yet all three died, according to police, at the hands of men they once loved.
Is in possession of a small handgun and is potentially homicidal and suicidal.
That call on police radio described Kirsten Lockett's husband days before she was murdered.
She's a really good mother who really didn't deserve anything that happened to her.
She was a mother of 6 and a wife in hiding. Her husband, a wanted man, accused of kidnapping and sexually assaulting Kirsten in Lincoln County.
He was wanted in connection for multiple felonies.
A few days after those radio calls, police reports say Kirsten's husband, Richard Lockett, found her hiding in her brother's house in Castle Rock. He's now in jail, accused of murdering her before attempting suicide.
There's no excuse for it. Absolutely no excuse.
In the days after the murder, friends and family questioned what happened and why, and what Denver7 Investigates uncovered in this search warrant.
Painful?
It is painful.
Lincoln County Sheriff Tom Nestor reacting to what we found. One of his deputies claiming in the hours before Kirsten's murder, he called the Castle Rock Police Department asking for increased patrols at the brothers' home.
Did this deputy embarrass your department?
He did. I will be blunt and say yes, he did.
Embarrassed because one of his deputies lied. This search warrant confirms Deputy Kurt Wineski admitted he had been untruthful. He never made the potentially life-saving call, and he lied to his supervisor.
I thought I could trust him, and for every intent and purpose, I should have been able to trust him. And that trust was violated.
After the lie became known, Deputy Wineski resigned. But the question remains.
Sheriff, one could argue that if those calls would have been made, Kirsten Lockett might be alive today.
Tony, I don't know. I can't ever say that we would know that. Ultimately, the responsibility lies with this defendant in this case.
Just a few weeks after reporting that law enforcement breakdown, sources with inside information directed us to a murder-suicide in Littleton. Now, Krista Benton's story.
Well, it's 911. I need an ambulance at 5537 South Grant Street.
It wasn't the first time police were called to this Littleton apartment for a domestic disturbance.
My mom and her boyfriend got into a fight. She's screaming about her neck right now.
You're listening to a recording of a 911 call. It was shortly after 2 in the morning last January. Tyler Jukes called police trying to help his mom in the middle of a loud and physical argument with her boyfriend.
So I helped her up. It's like he pulled my hair, put me on the ground.
Records obtained by Denver7 show this was the 5th time police responded to this address to deal with a domestic disturbance. This time, spending less than 30 minutes. Guns confirmed in the apartment, but no arrest, and police did not ask Krista's boyfriend to leave.
They didn't want to be there. They just did whatever they could as quick as they could to continue on with their night.
In your opinion, did the police department do its job?
Not at all.
12 hours later, another call to 911. This time it was Krista Benton, bleeding and out of breath, telling an operator she had been shot.
Okay, help is on the way.
Police and paramedics responded, but they were unable to save Krista's life. She died of a gunshot wound.
Can I tell you something?
Yes.
We were out on a disturbance at 2 in the morning,
Okay.
and there was a party with a gun.
Littleton police knew about the gun, knew about the history of domestic violence in the apartment, and this report says Krista's boyfriend, David Fallon, fired the gun before taking his own life.
They never once ever arrested him, and I don't think it ever went through their mind to arrest him.
On that afternoon back in January, 14-year-old Jonathan Fallon lost a mom and a dad. He says months before his mom's death, after a similar conflict, he also called 911 asking for help.
I called the cops and I was crying. I was telling them, like, please get here. My dad's hitting my mom.
Did they arrest him?
They did not arrest him.
Our investigation also uncovered serious questions about this report.
Are you still fighting? Yes, pretty badly. Is it physical or verbal? It's both.
Following that call, 12 hours before the murder, that original police report included only one sentence and 7 words. But take a look at what happened in the hours after the murder. The one-sentence report changed and modified to 6 paragraphs over 2 pages. And it's also important to note that original one-sentence report was not initially provided to Denver7 or to Krista's family and friends.
It infuriates me. They didn't do their job.
Following Denver7's initial investigations, Littleton's police chief, mayor, and members of council all declined interview requests to explain what happened and why.
It looks like a cover-up, sir.
I do not have anything that I can comment.
With camera rolling, we met Littleton's mayor at a city event in a public park.
It would be unusual for me to believe that there'd be a cover-up.
Our questions centered on that initial 7-word report and why it was modified and then kept from the public. Why Littleton officers ignored apparent warning signs and did not remove or arrest David Fallon before he reportedly killed Krista Benton.
I think it's important that we have this conversation.
After declining several requests and days after the mayor went on camera, Littleton's police chief changed his position and answered our questions.
Would it be fair for us to report that the officer responding that night could have and should have done a better job on the report?
Yes.
Krista Benton's family wants to know why David Fallon was not arrested that night. What's the answer?
Well, simply the answer is that we didn't have probable cause to do so.
Later in this half hour, more problems with domestic violence in Littleton. Now, another murder-suicide, this time in downtown Denver, involving a former mayor of a mountain town.
Can I have your attention, please? There is a person with a gun outside the building.
She held public office, the former mayor of Buena Vista, and her life ended in a very public way.
I was probably as angry as I've been in my life at her husband for taking that route of killing her and then killing himself.
Jimmy Tidwell's badge reads Police Chief of Buena Vista. He was also a longtime friend of the former mayor.
I can tell you, looking you right in the eye, I did not think that he would kill her.
It was yet another husband murdering his wife. A murder-suicide in the heart of downtown Denver.
My wife is dead.
But the seeds of this domestic violence started growing 5 years earlier. Public records obtained by Denver7 show a history of problems between the couple.
Did she have a weapon?
Yeah, she tried stabbing me
Okay, what did she try to stab you with?
with a pitchfork.
Buena Vista police arrested the mayor that day, charging her with felony domestic violence. And that wasn't the only time police responded to this address.
There were a history of domestic violence calls to her house. She had recently filed for divorce. Do you think she knew there was a chance he was going to kill her?
I knew she was scared. But I can't answer the question that if she knew he was going to kill her or not. I know she was afraid, I know that.
In the weeks before the murder-suicide, there were warning signs. Kara Russell filed for divorce back in April. Mickey Russell was admitted to a mental health facility in May. And reports show Kara's husband told police he wanted to die, threatening suicide by cop. Is there part of you that wonders, could this police department have done more?
I think we can always do more.
We've counted at least 40 domestic violence murder victims in the past 2 years in Colorado alone. Denver7 Investigates created a special section of our website with information on those cases and resources for victims, all available at thedenverchannel.com.
Ahead when Denver7 Investigates.
As I was walking out in tears and frustration, he said, "You deserve a day to yourself. Here's a pair of movie tickets."
Police mistakes leave victims in fear and potentially violent suspects on the streets.
Chief, would you have found this mistake if Denver7 didn't ask to review your records?
Probably not.
Many of our best investigations start with a tip. I'm Tony Kowaleski. Know something? Call us or drop us an email. Denver7 Investigates.
You're watching Denver7. Denver7 Investigates takes you inside the biggest stories.
It looks like a cover-up, sir.
Is there more you can do, or are you all doing the best you can?
Investigations that hold the powerful accountable.
Would you call this guy a predator?
Absolutely.
Did this scrutiny make your department a better department?
The Littleton city manager has been fired
because of what was uncovered by Denver7 Investigates.
He's an investigative reporter, and he's good at it.
If you have a tip, call Denver7 Investigates at 303-832-TIPS.
I filed those tickets away, and it felt like a slap in my face.
2 movie tickets. That's exactly what a Westminster police officer offered a victim of domestic violence after he dropped the ball. Movie projectors project stories. And by all indications, this is a story one Metro Denver Police Department would rather you not see.
I was faced with a gun held to my head. I woke up with the perpetrator over me with a knife.
You're listening to Elizabeth Stedman's story.
I was hit in the head so many times that the last one, I was knocked out.
She walked those facts and many more into this police department 4 years ago.
I walked in and I stated I am trying to evade a domestic violence situation. I am currently in fear of my life.
You walked into the Westminster Police Department hoping to get help.
Mm-hmm.
Did you?
No. I received no help at all.
Records show Westminster police believed evidence proved domestic violence charges should get filed against Elizabeth's partner. But 2.5 years later, Elizabeth called for a status update and learned no charges were filed. Who dropped the ball here? The DA? The Westminster Police Department?
Westminster Police Department.
Why do you say that?
That was the exact quote he said. He said, "You know what, I dropped the ball in this case. I let it fall through the cracks."
Denver7 has learned a series of paperwork errors by a detective and a sergeant inside the Westminster Police Department are the reason charges were never filed. Mistakes discovered after the statute of limitations had run out, meaning charges will never get filed.
I have no confidence in them right now.
And Denver7 Investigates uncovered this document, an independent review of what happened by the State Victim Rights Act Subcommittee. It refers to 3 separate and egregious acts by the Westminster Police Department. It says the department violated policy by not notifying the victim every time there was a status change in the case, and blamed a sergeant for mistakenly closing the case. Which leads us back to that movie projector and this question. If you're the Westminster Police Department, how do you apologize to a victim of domestic violence?
As I was walking out in tears and frustration, he said, "You deserve a day to yourself. Here's a pair of movie tickets."
They don't file felony charges. They admit they dropped the ball, and they hand you a couple movie tickets?
Yep. 2 individual tickets to go see a movie. And I filed those tickets away, and it felt like a slap in my face.
Their response is to send 2 movie tickets.
When somebody could have
lost their life.
Amy Miller's title reads Executive Director of the state's Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Offensive?
I think it is insulting.
So how does Westminster's police chief explain what happened and why? Well, we wanted to ask Chief Tim Carlson why his department made a series of paperwork errors preventing justice for Elizabeth. We wanted to ask Chief Tim Carlson why his department attempted to placate Elizabeth with nothing more than 2 movie tickets. The only question Chief Carlson answered was our request for an interview. That answer was no.
Department the size of Westminster doesn't want to answer questions, doesn't want to explain what happened.
They can't own up to what they're not doing. They're not serving the community like they say they're going to and like they should be.
So now, 4 years after she walked through the doors of this police department, Elizabeth's attacker remains free and never charged. Elizabeth got 2 movie tickets and now a chance to turn on her internal projector, a chance to finally tell her story.
When you learned that we were doing this story, what was your reaction?
I was shocked. It made me feel like I wasn't so crazy this whole time thinking that this was absolutely wrong.
State documents show Westminster Police did reprimand the officers involved, and all of the department's officers received training on victim empathy. Now, we do intend to meet Chief Carlson in a public place to ask those questions Elizabeth wants answered. Stay tuned. Now, Elizabeth is not the only victim harmed a second time by police mistakes. Now back to Littleton, where our digging uncovered police forgetting to seek an arrest warrant against a man accused of threatening to kill his wife.
And I had to, lock the door.
That's the voice of a wife calling 911, concerned about her estranged husband.
There's a back window. Trying to get in that way.
I had a gentleman over. I was just trying to get him to whoop his ass.
Another example of a call for help ending in mistakes.
I'm killing him. I don't have nothing to lose.
But it appears like we made a mistake.
That's Littleton's police chief acknowledging a mistake inside these reports. A mistake that went undiscovered for more than 9 months.
Chief, would you have found this mistake if Denver7 didn't ask to review your records?
Probably not.
He's been causing a disturbance all night here in the apartment complex, trying to get into her apartment.
I can tell you on its face, it appears that we didn't do what we said we were going to do, and we're looking at that in detail.
Reports uncovered and reviewed by Denver7 Investigates exposed the breakdowns made by Littleton's police department. The officer on that call, Corporal Andrew Schmidt.
It's a possibility he did make a mistake.
Denver7 discovered Corporal Schmidt failed to file an arrest warrant against the estranged husband, a report he intended to file, but for some reason never did. A mistake that was not discovered until Denver7 reviewed the corporal's record on domestic violence, a mistake also missed by the corporal's supervisors.
We hold ourselves to high standards, and when our officers don't achieve those standards and don't perform at that level, we hold them accountable.
They didn't want to be there.
Corporal Schmidt was also the lead officer the night Krista Benton's son called for help.
I need an officer to respond.
Littleton's internal investigation into Corporal Schmidt's handling of domestic violence calls recently concluded.
Just ended up punching her window out.
It found Corporal Schmidt in violation of department policy, suspended for 20 hours without pay. The investigation also found failures by supervisors during the tracking process, leading to modifications in department practices.
Has our investigation provided a bit of a wake-up call for your department?
I would say yes.
Painful?
Yes. But necessary, I think.
So after we raised the question, Littleton police did find the mistake and file an arrest warrant against the estranged husband, but he's only charged with criminal menacing for breaking that window. Officers apparently lost a key voicemail recording of the suspect threatening to kill his wife. So our investigation exposed a problem.
It did.
2 law enforcement agencies retrained their officers because of what Denver7 Investigations uncovered. Now lawmakers are paying attention.
It has been a rude awakening for me, Tony, and I'm glad that you've brought this to light.
Many of our best investigations start with a tip. I'm Tony Kowaleski. Know something? Call us or drop us an email. Denver7 Investigates.
I am going to give a call to action to my fellow lawmakers that it is time to revisit domestic violence.
Now, a call to action. The issue, inconsistencies in the tracking of domestic violence arrests. Investigative reporter Ryan Luby has this portion of our story. Ryan.
Well, we've been digging through data for months. We contacted law enforcement agencies all over the state with a simple question. How often do you make an arrest on a domestic call? We found a wide range of numbers and inconsistent data keeping that caught the attention of lawmakers. Colorado law mandates an arrest in domestic violence cases when there is probable cause to believe a crime has been committed. But as our investigations have shown, that key phrase, probable cause, leaves a lot of room for discretion and dispute.
And we expect them to exercise discretion on the hardest cases that they'll confront on the street, and that's misdemeanor domestic violence.
Domestic violence is very complex. It's very nuanced, and the criminal justice system is much more a black and white type of intervention.
So we wanted to know, across Colorado, how often do police called to domestic disputes find probable cause to arrest someone? We started asking, reaching out to more than a dozen law enforcement agencies across the state.
When we ran the numbers, we knew they were wrong. They were too low.
The Jefferson County Sheriff's Office says Denver7's request for its domestic arrest percentage exposed a problem. Whenever deputies plug in a report into the computer system, they're supposed to check a box indicating it's domestic violence related.
We discovered that some deputies had inadvertently or carelessly or just flat forgotten to check the boxes. When we determined that what the problem was, we did additional briefing training with all our patrol deputies to remind them of how important this is.
Jefferson County had to work with its IT department to figure out its arrest rate is about 50%. Some agencies like Arapahoe County and Denver turned over detailed data, showing arrest percentages close to 70%. Fort Collins Police showed a 69% arrest rate, Buena Vista Police 53%, Littleton Police only 28% of domestic calls. Big differences in numbers and data showing everyone's following the same law, but tracking it different ways. And some departments told us their record-keeping systems simply don't track the calls that don't end up in arrests.
If you don't have data, it's very hard to know whether you're effective or not.
The only way to save lives is for us to see those trends and do something about it.
Two Colorado lawmakers who reviewed our investigations said it's time for change.
It says we need to make sure there is standardization, and that's an issue that the legislature can take a look at.
I am really hoping that change is on its way. It may take time, it may take money, and it may take effort and fortitude, but it certainly is time.
Ultimately, what we've uncovered and the questions we've asked have brought significant and tangible change in several Colorado law enforcement agencies, including discovering a hidden cultural problem inside Littleton City Hall. Littleton City Council voted to fire its city manager after Denver7's investigations showing a crucial police report was deleted and then withheld from our public records requests.
It was an absolute lack of candid discussion by the city manager and the staff with the mayor about a real problem in the police department.
And the council also called on the police chief to address a public meeting about domestic violence.
We took a really hard introspective look at how we do things in Littleton.
Chief Doug Stevens also told the city council that everyone in the Littleton Police Department received 10 hours of extra training. Littleton Police also changed policies, requiring a thorough police report on every domestic call and improved follow-ups on calls like the one we uncovered leading to Corporal Andrew Schmidt's suspension. Is that enough?
It's a start, but I don't think it's enough.
Krista Benton's son, Jonathan Fallon, now lives with the decisions Littleton police made when his family called for help. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm sad some days, and I really do miss my mom and dad a lot, like every single day. My dad wouldn't have done what he did if they would have taken him away. He could have possibly gotten help, and it would have saved my mom's life if they did the littlest thing.
Jonathan's grandmother is now raising him. She's also mourning her daughter and hoping her family's loss will prevent another. Your daughter's death produced change.
Yes, it did. And I think she's smiling down at us now, saying, "Way to go, Mom." I really do.
It makes me happy to feel that I was finally heard after there was nobody paying attention. Nobody really cared until you guys came along, really.
As you've seen tonight, we've held the powerful accountable. We've uncovered systematic failures hurting victims here in Colorado. Our pledge to you, our digging will continue in the days and months ahead. I'm Tony Kovaleski reminding you, Denver 7 Investigates. Thanks for joining us. Good night.